live on, okay, so I've got that piece done. We are now live on YouTube, okay? And with all of that, I think we're ready to go. Everybody ready? Take a deep breath. And I'm going to admit everybody. And I am going to admit all. Hello, everyone in Zoom, and those of you who are joining us on YouTube live stream. I am Henry Crawford, and welcome to the May 2021 edition of Poets versus the Pandemic. Tonight, we're featuring poet Karren Alenier reading from her new book, How We Hold On. She'll be joined by Mervyn Taylor and Julie Marie Wade. Joining me as co-host tonight is the young poet, Julian Berman. Hi, Julian. As we venture forth into our second year, let me thank all of you who have been with us over the past year and who have supported our program, which is all about providing a reading space for poets whose books have come out during the pandemic. Let me also thank the WordWorks for their help in making all of this possible. Okay, so let's get started. First, and most importantly, we want to purchase the poets' books. We want you to purchase the poets' books. Let me hang on for 1 second as I have to get our little co-host in here. Where are you there? There you are. I'm going to make him a co-host. There we go. Right. So most importantly, we want you to purchase the poets' books. So I've asked Julian to put a link into the chat that will take you to the places where you can purchase books of each of the poets tonight. We also have a donation page, donation button on that page, so don't feel shy about donating to our program. We at WordWorks and Cafe Muse will thank you wholeheartedly. I'm also going to ask Julian to put into the chat a link where you can follow our WordWorks online readings, all of them. Sign up on the registration form and you'll be on our mailing list to get all Zoom links for all of our readings. Please note that we are now Zooming with closed captions. So you can take advantage of that if you click on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We may or may not have that fully operational due to a technical problem we were experiencing as we were just coming on. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poets, feel free to drop a question into the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as we have time. A couple more things. Please join us on Monday, June 7, when Cafe Muse Online will present poets Tara Campbell and Meg Kearney. We'll have new music from Michael Davis and photographs by the renowned photographer, Dan Murano. And we'll be back here again with PvP on June 16th with poet John Odell, who'll be reading from his new book, Sons and Tattoos, along with guest poets Reuben Jackson and our own Cafe Muse team member, Susan Oki. So let me say a few words about Karren Alenier. Few people have done as much for the poetry community here and elsewhere as Karren Alenier. She's the founder of the long-running Cafe Muse series and brings poets to publication with her work at WordWorks Press. But she comes also with a resume of accomplishments that are a mile long. So I'm just going to try to hit the highlights or else we'll never hear a word of her poetry, and I won't let that happen. Karren is the author of 7 collections of poetry, including her most recent collection, How We Hold On. Her poetry books have won awards and best picks at bookstores. She's an enthusiastic opera lover. She has written about the form as well as being an accomplished librettist herself. She's an expert on Gertrude Stein, and she has studied with Paul Bowles. And that's just the half of it. So I'm going to ask Julian to put a link into the chat, again, with a list of her complete accomplishments from our Cafe Muse website. So let me bring on my friend, whom I've shared many, many awesome experiences, including a memorable night at the 930 Club. Here now is Karren Alenier.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for hosting me this evening on Poets versus the Pandemic. I'm really, truly excited to be here because of a little glitch in what was going on behind the scenes this evening. So I'm very pleased. And I'm pleased to be reading with Mervyn Taylor, who's published by Broadstone Books, and Julie Marie Wade, who is published by The Wordworks. So hang on to your hats. This selection of poems has a lot of turbulence. Maybe I created my own turbulence before we got here. I'm going to start with a poem that is from my opera. It's called Diana au Courant, and it refers to the modern day Diana the Huntress. The opera is Gertrude Stein Invents a Jump Early On. And yes, this is Gertrude. She had a rifle, and after her mother died, she and her brother went out in the Oakland hillside and shot birds. So here we have Diana. Diana au Courant. She was a flippy lady, a real sixer in a deck of nines. She knew the handle from the muzzle, the click of the cock from the squeeze of the trigger. She listened, an authentic spoon tuner in a forest of forks. Her ear was better than a metal detector, sharper and juicier than a blowgun. Her mouth tasted the purple plum. In short, she had more life in her than the entire city of New York. So, in the next poem, we meet Señor Wences, who was a Spanish ventriloquist and comedian. He was popular in my family and many American households. And he had a bunch of puppets that he talked to, or he talked for. Señor Wences, 103, dies the day of the Columbine High School massacre. Johnny the puppet argued with Señor Wences about driving cars, dating girls, hitting targets. Is difficult, the master pronounced after each one. Is easy, Johnny insisted again and again, his painted mouth opening in an odd slip. After all, his lip was the puppeteer's thumb. In the living room, the TV flickered its black and white truths. Ed Sullivan presented a really good shoe. You could be a star, Dad said, but practice is self-evident. On Saturdays, we saw him aim, finger the trigger, and strike the straw bullseye just before Thanksgiving at the Isaac Walton shoot. He'd win a turkey. Target practice paid for a family of 8 to eat is difficult to keep meat on the table. For a puppet, Johnny exuded life. No bullies barred his path. Like any teenage boy, he believed in his power to hit the mark, get the girl, drive away in a red convertible. Dad never carried a gun in World War II, never stalked deer or boar in the countryside, never pulled his piece the night Grandpa Saul's liquor store was held up, but he practiced. After bantering with Johnny about the danger of guns, Señor Wences would lift the top of Pedro's box and check with him. "Sarait?" he asked. "Sarait," Pedro affirmed. Pedro, nothing but a talking head, prisoner to his box. I tell my husband this story. One afternoon, a boy who came home with my sister Honey spied Dad's handgun, and bam, a bullet slammed through the living room wall. For the sake of argument, Let's say it's easy to get the girl, easy to hit the mark, easy to open the door, leave in an automobile. Dad didn't think so. It was so easy. His daughter, his house, his gun, though not his car. How could he be so careless? So right, Dad would ask when he noticed a frown. The right to bear arms. I think about my father's pistol in the hands of my sister's friend, the teenagers running bloody from Columbine High, and the passing of Senor Wences, how his arm and hand became Johnny. The next poem, Metal, is in the form known as a parallel, which was invented by Billy Collins. It uses repetition and what I call word salad in each stanza until you arrive at the stanza, the last stanza, which is stanza 4. And it has, but where all the words, it's a word salad. All the words from all the other stanzas are put together. So here it is, metal. We want to discuss what happened. We want to discuss what happened. Where should the conversation begin? Where should the conversation begin? Should discuss where to start. What happened? We want the conversation. If 19 men menaced one woman, if 19 men menaced one woman, no black veil could protect her. No black veil could protect her. If 19 women could protect Black, no one veil menaced her men. Terrorism starts in the family kitchen. Terrorism starts in the family kitchen. Who said metal detectors find knives? Who said metal detectors find knives? Family metal starts terrorism. Who in the kitchen said knives? Find detectors. Terrorism starts to veil conversation in the kitchen. 19 detectors protect one family. What happened could start her metal. We discuss menace men. If no black knives find the woman should want, who said where? In the next poem, the form is a pantoum, which means that the second and fourth lines of each stanza become the first and third lines in the next stanza. The last stanza also uses the first and third lines from the first stanza, which means that the first line of the poem and the last line of the poem are exactly the same. One other thing, the first stanza refers to the Decalogue. The Decalogue refers to 10 statements, such as the 10 Commandments. This poem has 10 stanzas where each line is 10 syllables long. This is something you wouldn't hear, but I'm telling you so that you know what I was up to when I was making this poem. Also, the title is a quote from William Burroughs, who wrote the most incoherent drug novel of all, Naked Lunch. Title is, I don't want to hear any more tired old junk talk, William Burroughs. For the love of Moses, apologize. Freedom from slavery, you realize, starts with yourself, leaves nothing to disguise. Gone, the Decalogue. Aren't you scandalized? Freedom from slavery, you realize, seems contrary to the human condition. Gone, the Decalogue. Aren't you scandalized? Heroin and guns, front, strong addictions. Seems contrary to the human condition to find ecstasy in the tools of death. Heroin and guns, front, strong addictions. When did God's name become the shibboleth. To find ecstasy in the tools of death, sisters and brothers take aim, squeeze, and fire. When did God's name become the shibboleth, opening doors to the devil's desire? Sisters and brothers take aim, squeeze, and fire. But why target your mother and father, opening doors to the devil's desire? In polarized shades, you are a hipster. But why target your mother and father? What if they set you adrift in a boat? In polarized shades, you are a hipster. Light or dark, just a bothersome footnote. What if they set you adrift in a boat, abandon you to enemy hands? Light or dark, just a bothersome footnote. Whether salvation or escape your stand. Abandon you to enemy hands are doctors, counselors, the burning bush. Whether salvation or escape your stand are cops and judges, necessary ambush. Are doctors, counselors, the burning bush? Write your own tablet for how to survive. Are cops and judges necessary ambush? Consider the consequences for jive. Write your own tablets for how to survive. Start with yourself. Leave nothing to disguise. Consider the consequences of jive. For the love of Moses, apologize. Okay, so the next poem uses a form that was invented by Washington, D.C.'s Truth Thomas. I don't know if he's in the house. He thought he might be able to make it, but if he's here, I want him, to be recognized. The first and the last line of each of this form uses the same words, but in a different order. But in between lines 2 through 9, there's a certain pattern of repetition. And so normally it would make a C shape, but I made this a double skinny. And so it has another line of single words closing it up so it looks like a square. Okay. Weslaco, Texas, a dark comedy. My sister lives in a noisy neighborhood. Bang, duck, border police, gun running, death, quick, bang, duck, drug deal, business cards, explodes, played, bang, duck, in a noisy neighborhood. My sister lives. Okay, so I know that I saw that Grace Cavallari's in the house, and I wanted to say that this particular, yes, we all love Grace. This particular poem, you might say, is a kind of a play, and Grace has always been my go-to for advice on playwriting. And so it's in 2 parts. And the second part has 2 different sections to it. So section 1 takes place on the West End Road of Negril, Jamaica, outside of the resort called Tensing Pen. And the second section goes back and forth between a cockfight in an undisclosed location, while where the attendees are all smoking ganj, which is marijuana, and Leroy's home, which is just off the West End Road. And here come the police after Leroy. So it's a very tense situation. Okay. Cox. 1. So. One morning, 2 young Jamaicans lounged at Tensing Pen's gate, boombox pulsing out ganja gun. Echo, new hairdo, my mate asked, bobbing to Marley's beat. The boy nodded with thuggish pride, his hair only half groomed high into an afro, the other side flat against his head. How'd you do it, man? Stick your finger in an electric socket? The friend spit out a laugh, but Echo frowned. Today we meet Echo's sister Simone sitting next to her father's cold grill where's Leroy, your mom, Rose, your parents grill the best jerk chicken, steam the tastiest callaloo. Home down this road, she gestures to a dusty path just beyond the stand. Echo got shot by the police. Business is slow. My father, so. 2. Foul. Under the breadfruit and mango trees, the men roll spliffs, light up, inhale, deeply inspect the cocks tethered by 1 foot to the ground. On the garden side of the West End Road, Leroy, in the shade of an aki tree, shakes ganja into his paper, licks it closed, lights up. Soon the birds are weighed to find an equal match. When the Negril police arrive at the family home, they point their guns at the father. Leroy, get into the squad car. In the fight pen, the cocks fly at each other, pecking without pause at shaved necks, maybe an eye. But the son, Echo, says, "You can't take my father," and picks up 2 rocks. In the stands, the men hoping to double their bets shout, "Kill him, don't give up." Further down the cliff road, rutless now and fast, the chef at Serious Chicken cranks up his stereo. Marley, long time a ghost, wails, "Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight." And this is my last poem. And the title is In the Year of Perfect Vision, and it runs straight into the poem. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And I hope that 2020 treated you gently. In the year of perfect vision, 2020, we are cautiously optimistic that acuity will be free of high-order abrasions, that we can cross borders with the ability to see at 20 feet as well as 5 in front of us. What is in front of our eyes shocks the nervous system, flies in the face of good sighting. That shadow, a fox, a timber wolf, a coyote. When our lid slams shut to deny our fear, we sigh in blank, black relief, our rods and cones hidden from bright or pale light. Where is the prey? What should we, the hunters, be thankful for? Thank you.
Let's give a Zoom round of applause for poet Karren Alenier. Okay, so thank you so much, Karren. Great reading. And now let me introduce Mervyn Taylor. Mervyn Taylor is a Trinidad-born poet and longtime Brooklyn resident who taught at several New York City schools and colleges. He's the author of 7 books of poetry, including his most recent, The Country of Warm Snow. His work has been described as possessing an admirable degree of subtlety and a tone that keeps him separate and unique. A prolific writer, Mervyn also has a chapbook of poems titled News of the Living, Corona Poems, and it was just published this year, along with the other book. I think you'll be intrigued by this gifted poet who will be joining us tonight from Trinidad. So let's bring on to the PvP Zoom stage, Mervyn Taylor.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Good, great. Okay. I'm gonna jump right in. I'm gonna read from News of the Living, published by Broadstone, And I'm going to do the first poem and in the book and the last poem. This viral season. Now they have closed the botanic gardens. The magnolias bloom white and alone. The cherry blossoms bud as spectacular as ever. But no one remarks how early they arrive, the pink carpet they leave on the grass. The tropical trees, flamboyants and palms, lean in a greenhouse no one will visit for a while. And in the gift shop, a solitary clerk carefully wipes the shelves and wears the picture
Merwin, you
of a
seem to have
hybrid.
lost a little sound there. Is it your mic, your local mic? Because I can see that you are unmuted.
Are you hearing me now? Let me do something here. Okay.
We can hear.
Let me see what's happening. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Better? Okay. All right. So sorry. Should I read that again or what? This viral season. You hear me okay? All right. Now they have closed the botanic gardens. The magnolias bloom white and alone the cherry blossoms bud as spectacular as ever. But no one remarks how early they arrive, the pink carpet they leave on the grass. The tropical trees, flamboyants and palms lean in a greenhouse no one will visit for a while. And in the gift shop, a solitary clerk carefully wipes the shelves and wears the picture of a hybrid rose. And the closing poem, which actually came as a kind of afterthought when Larry had said, okay, that's it, no more. But we squeezed this one in, epilogue. On an asteroid called COVID-19 came riding the figure of a man named George, which, when it hit, opened such a crater in the conscience of mankind that the protesters are marching still. The roads they travel littered with statues of men whose fortunes are being rewritten as ill-gotten. Chains they used to bind others now yanking their likenesses from their pedestals. George, his eyes focused on the feet of onlookers, called to a mother dead 2 years to the day, while the world, alerted to his cry, awoke to the fire seen from every window. An asteroid aimed for the earth did not miss this time, opened a hole in the heart of Minnesota that lies smoking like a barbecue pit on the 4th of July, around which folks, having lost their appetite, seek to rescue George from the flame. This is from News of the Living. Okay, I'm gonna try to move a bit quickly. I want to read just a couple from Country of Warm Snow. The poem is called That, if I can find it, yeah. It's called That One. And I'll say just a little bit about inspiration for the poem. After having read several times William Melvin Kelly's book, A Different Drummer, the book opens with a slave auction. The slave ship has just come in and there's an auction. And it's this giant of a man comes up from down in the hole somewhere. And this is basically about, not that scene in the book, but about a slave auction. That one. How they picked back then was by fondling the balls, the penis, the calves, by running their hands along the flanks as you would horses, by looking into the mouths and other orifices, pretending it wasn't exciting, not the thrill of a Saturday afternoon, not a good break from the boring breeze blowing through the weeping willows, not a chance to see in the flesh the cargo that came in chains from the other side of the world, passed through a door into hell, The sea as if in a kettle boiling, the green land disappearing in a gulp, gone, the last hut like a dream upon waking to the touch of a strange hand, the scent of a strange perfume upon a skin so translucent, veins like gray rivers snaking through swamps of moss that hung in beards off the magnolias, as in whispers the wives advise, this one, this one, for the bulbous knots on his arms, for the pulsing drum of the heart visible just beneath the sternum, for the vacancy in the rooms of his eyes as they search for the wife, the child not quite 7, for the ridge of a spine that will answer the lash with its own grimace, its own inimitable dance in returning to the tree where its navel string climbs like a vine. You can see now if you go there these many years after. Okay. And this is another poem from Country of Warm Snow. It's called Taking My Brother Home. In the morning, I go to bury his ashes in our mother's grave. His request was to be thrown in the sea, in a river, or in the savannah. But when we tried to do that with Uncle, his remains blew back in our faces. My cousin and I coated white like fish ready to fry. I'll put my brother with our mom, write his name on the headstone under hers, and hope he understands why here, instead of blowing about, stopping at friends' doors, most of whom have passed away too, yelling, open up, damn it, what you got to drink? And I'll try you with some new poems. Letters to my mother. One Christmas she dyed her hair black and fell so sick we almost had no Christmas at all. And then the year she died, I was so far away, I couldn't get home. Just cried in the rented room, remembering the face she made when I went off to the movies, leaving her on the veranda staring out to the main road. Soon I traveled even further away. Where are the letters I wrote or failed to write when women with tattoos took me to Virginia to meet their aunts around card tables, offered me gin by the glassful? I see her now, reading to a neighbor, one I had scribbled when mosquitoes in Biche proved too big, the river too muddy, and I used the 5 she'd stuffed in my pocket, getting home in time to hear her say, don't I know my son? Don't I? Love of reading. I reach for the volume she loaned me, bending corners each time I pause. There's love in it, an action. Bars where humans drink and where freedom's taken away. There's comfort when the world intrudes and a new chapter lets the hero come back home. The girl who first let him touch her is dying. He lifts her with the help of others out to the ambulance. It's a sadness I can afford, and that of someone else's life. Ink smudged as I turn the page. I take my time because it must last until we're ready to go outside again. When she reminds me it's overdue, return it I must, along with her love. I should have asked her to dance. You should have asked her to dance, said Freddie, the gay guy who swung the girl past where I was standing. Marcy was her name. She smiled. Why hadn't I asked her? I didn't trust my legs. They might wobble crossing to where she stood with friends. Just recently, I heard that she'd committed suicide somewhere in the Bronx, brokenhearted over a boy. It wasn't me. but I feel badly that I didn't ask her to dance, like it could have saved her life somehow. Gum. In American war movies, chewing gum was a sign of staying calm while bullets whizzed overhead, a sign of the kindness of GIs as they passed out sticks of it to wide-eyed kids. In Minnesota, while a policeman kneeled on George Floyd's neck, one of the officers kept chewing as Floyd called to his deceased mother that he was dying. And in Chicago, a woman just out the shower stood in her living room shivering, the broken door letting in light, cops in a ring around her as she screamed, "Wrong house, you got the wrong house." And though the sergeant used his jacket to cover her darkness, she'll never forget their faces, especially the one who never stopped smiling and chewing gum, who never once looked away. All right, so maybe just two more. Life, such as it is, goes on. Only 15 animals remain in the zoo in the Gaza Strip. One, a tiger that hasn't eaten in 4 days. Once, this was a popular place for family and school outings, but war and money woes have left the owner only this sad collection. He has had some of the dead animals stuffed and put on display. Those still alive include an ostrich, a turtle, and a pelican. Soon he will sell the tiger for $23,000 to a Palestinian who raises lion cubs. Meanwhile, the owner of a Rottweiler that mauled his son has decided to euthanize the animal. The dog had been chained but managed to stretch until his paw hooked the pram the child was in, eating his ice cream. This is one of the stories with which the owner of the zoo entertains the kids, those who still manage to come. And the last one, cheap labor. I'm trying to bring this all back home now. Cheap labor. The workmen are filling a crack in my veranda wall. Such a simple job it seemed to me until they began explaining the foundation, it's weak. The mortar, it's melting, turning to dust. By the end of the first day, I'm afraid to sit and read, aware of the cavern they've left, the rubble in the yard. I couldn't catch that last set of whispers, what more they might need. I've shown them the totem to my father in the garden. I'll pile the stones around it. He may need them when I tell him what they cost. Or put them in my mother's basket of ferns hanging nearby. She always had the better aim. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mervyn Taylor. A powerful voice coming up to us from Trinidad. Thank you so much. And now, let me introduce Julie Marie Wade. Julie Marie Wade is the author of 13 collections of poetry and prose, including her most recent poetry collection, Skirted, just released in the March of 2021. So we're all poets in the pandemic, I think, on this panel. Julie teaches in the creative writing program at Florida International University and reviews regularly for Lambda Literary Review and The Rumpus. She comes live to us from South Florida tonight. This is Julie Marie Wade.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And it was a joy to hear Karren and to hear Mervyn read. And it's also a joy to see Nancy, my publisher and editor, in the audience. Nancy White, thank you for coming. I'm going to start with a poem tonight from Skirted. This is what the book looks like. I'm going to start with a poem that I think for myself might be the heart poem of the collection. This is something that I do with my students every time we read a book, we try to identify, since poetry collections don't have necessarily a thesis, right, like an academic paper, what would be the poem that maybe epitomizes something about the book's overall themes. And I'd never thought about that in relation to my own work until I was getting ready for this reading. And I thought, I need to pick the heart poem to start. So I think that poem is a poem called Peripeteia. It's a Greek word that I really love. And when I learned it, I knew I needed to use it at some point in a poem. It means a reversal of fortune or a sudden change. And the roots of the word are actually connected to the roots of the word fall. So the word for me has some significance for both coming out and for certain kinds of estrangement that can follow. So this is Peripeteia. It's like being 18 again, the way you can only listen to so much soft music in a dimly lit room before something has to perforate or puncture, the needles stick or unstick. Your heart a feathered thing, a quilled, willful thing, porcupine heart, ferocious and abysmal, desperate to pierce someone else's skin in order to dull its own pain. So you say to the man you don't love yet, may never love, though you know you're supposed to, breath thick in the throat of the body you don't love yet, may never love, aren't even supposed to. Will you go down to the vending machine? Will you bring back all the chocolate and a cherry Coke too? He says now, right now, sweaty at the nape of his neck and worried, wanting to please you the way candy would, the way caffeine. Is this a test? Is this only a test? So when he's gone in his stocking feet and the radiator is burning hot, like the coals in your father's old Kamado pot, and you are without your buttons and your best sense, the bobby pins your mother taught you to twist in your hair, disheveled, she might call you now. But remembering a storybook where the princess took bed sheets and tied them together, descended the trellis fashioned from the remnants of her coitus interruptus into the night, into the more than night of the equinox, onto a road half paved and entirely abandoned. Are you that woman? Will you be that woman once or in perpetuity, her ankles shackled to the last outpost of moonlight on the last path that leads to a lake without a boat ramp, a last summer at Bluefish Cove, which is where you're headed anyway, whether you know it or not. A tremor like someone turned the snow globe over. You hear him knocking. You locked me out, he'll say. You don't answer. His shoes dangle from the telephone line. A prank, a small amusement to pass the time. Let me in, he'll say, his voice growing louder like the wolf in another story you read once upon a time before bed. But you deal in riddles now. Even fables are far too long to recount. You slip a note, perforated, under the door. That quill heart, still good for something, after all. So the next, thank you. I can still see you clapping. That's so nice. Thank you. The next set of poems that I'm going to read are my, I kind of think of them as my proxy poems. Something that I work with my students on a lot is if we want to write our own story and we want to keep plumbing it and trying to understand it, how do we keep doing that in a way that doesn't become redundant, hopefully? And so one of the ways we can do it, I think, is to find, mythic characters, pop cultural characters, historical figures, people whose stories resonate in some way, whether large or small, and sort of graft our story onto theirs or access something from their story in a poem. So I'm going to start this section with a poem called Empathy for Electra. I have some empathy for her. Empathy for Electra, who was not easy, that ganglion of a girl, axon smooth and dendrites scattered, cleft nerves of neural illusion. Something in us always favors revenge, a line drawn, then crossed, transversals of mischief and myelin. As myth renders the meaning secondary to the source, so also the primary lust, the primitive passion for all that mother and father could not give and for what it would mean to live without them. Be it heart or be it brave cerebellum that bears the burden of balancing between extremes. And maybe she did leave Mycenae at the wrong moment. And maybe, yes, her path was brambled, whether or not their own was bent. But there's a place in the palm where the lifeline drops off, and the tines of the line are revenge or remorse or regret. Who could fault her the years of falter? With her butterfly net and her wishing you wells, who could fault her, that salty air, those meager coins, plumbing an ancient pause, wanting them back, or was it wanting them new? This poem is called What Nimrod Should Have Known. The word like wood is porous and prone to sliver. The tongue, which is called mother, answers to 100 other names. The stutterer, child of slow elocution, of swift permutation, utters an equivalent truth. Even wrapped in Eve's garments, even wielding the sword of Adam's violent vernacular, the Jenga puzzle of speech totters, glottal stopped in the throat of forthcoming and forgotten, on the lips of the blotted horizon where eminent and imminent splinter into reef and wave, and the twin pillars of the crushed tower jut forth from the sea, one boasting silence, the other cacophony. And this poem, just in case you don't recognize the character of Brody, speaks to my deep and abiding love of the film Jaws, and also to my obsession with some fragments of that story that seem to resonate with my own life as well, at least as metaphor. We leave the beaches for the tourists, mostly. Brody did not want to believe in the great white any more than the mayor did. This is the part the history makers always seem to miss. Whenever someone is watching from a crow's nest for land or calling out from a pulpit over the furrowed sand, everybody out of the water. We want to justify these actions as insight, something we don't have because we are too ordinary, too trusting, like children still singing Que Sera, Sera in Glee Club, eating white bread sandwiches with all the crust cut off. But Brody had seen the girl, what was left of her, and in the raw terror of that mangled scene, he understood the Cartesian split better than any philosopher. Renouncing it, he might have murmured something, retching into his handkerchief on the long drive home to the beach house where his wife and kids were waiting. In these stories, they are always waiting, as if they never move between frames or step off the stage into someplace unscripted. Brody might have murmured how the girl did not have a body, how some of her parts were not merely missing. In fact, Chrissy Watkins was a body, the same way his wife was, and his sons, and also himself, which is the hardest moment, the everyman moment, when the hero understands that flesh is truer than fiction and prophet, more trustworthy than any ephemeral soul. And faced with that prospect, what would anyone do? We'd pay the bounty hunter. We'd face our fears of the water. Bloodthirsty, like the enemy, we'd seek our flailing revenge. And then I'm going to read a poem that Karren asked me to read, which helped me shape the whole reading, because then I knew I haven't read this one for an audience yet. So thank you, Karren, for asking. This is called Love Poem for Sisyphus, and it begins with an epigraph from Camus. To the celestial thunderbolts, he preferred the benediction of water. As do I, So often, soothing flux of these currents, soft baptism of this rain, never the sense to come in out of, now the certainty that life remains uncertain, the pleasure this brings us, the pain. O Sisyphus, how you surprise me, man after my own heart, absurdist hero, friend sought for strength in futile struggle. Sometimes we cherish in others what we cannot embrace in ourselves. All this standing water in the well of consciousness, raising my pail only to pour out its contents again. And how to distinguish repetition from redundancy, anaphora from tautology. Sisyphus, you've molded for me a grinding axe, notching the tree of knowledge with heavy, irregular blows. Yes, you, servant of epistemology, your bended knee of bluff and circumspect camaraderie, on our journey over this river and through these woods, where we cannot be but altered by retracing. The truth changes, you see, and not just rhetorically, as when you see in the vanity mirror a new face set about the same obligations, proceeding in what would appear the same way. All my life I have strolled through the sibilant valley, fricative formations of sex and sleep, how I never go down easily, clasping climax like a locket at the throat, anticipating entropy, longing for exoneration, then the waking, returning of mind to body, as if an essential eddy obstructed by stone has produced this calm place of contrapuntal motion. But we best be going again, back to the quarry, sifting through silt, cutting rock clean away from the hill, only to build it back up. Erosion, excavation, reconstruction. The only tools we have, the only world we know. And I'm going to end with a poem that isn't in this book, but that I probably wouldn't have written if I hadn't written this book. It's sort of the poem from the other side. A lot of this book is about making peace with estrangements of family of origin, and also the joy of making a life with a beloved now. And not too long ago, I was at a writer's conference, and one of the students there came out right before she read her beautiful poems, and a good response to a poem is usually a poem. And so I wanted to write a poem for, don't have to be young folks, but often are people coming out or maybe reluctant to do so for fear of losing that first family of origin. So this poem is called Out Here. Out here, the air is clear, the water has gone down under the bridge, the same bridge that once was burning. And you've heard the way they say the daffodils are out now, and other kinds of flowers, by which they mean their green stems have given rise to blossoms, and you are blooming too. The fist of your heart clenched so tight for so long inside you, now slowly unfurling. The air is clear, though you may be breathing heavy, your voice a slim missile of light against the vast dark landscape. You wonder who can even hear you out here, if anyone is even listening. The stars peer back merely curious, tracing your whereabouts as you once traced theirs. The moon has been accused of phases too, but marvels how they still say constant as the moon. An orbit is not a weakness. A body, heavenly or otherwise, is not a metaphor. Just think of the first time you ever wandered into the woods. Someone told you to hide, so you ran toward the nearest thicket, crouching down, counting silently to yourself in the underbrush, fearing at first the rustle of feet, but later fearing the absence of the rustle. Had they forgotten you after all? out of sight, out of mind. The air was thick with smoke. Someone had been burning leaves. It was late autumn, and you followed the spice of the wind toward a clearing. You had never felt so small as when you stood in the center of the open field, but your lungs swelled. You shouted and heard the out in it. Even then, the way your throat became a bright flower, a tulip huge and red, opening in the unobstructed light of the wrong season. Ollie, ollie, oxen free. It was a forecast, but you didn't know that then. A rallying cry, you wanted them to find you so much. The daylight broad, the future far away as the river head, or the ending of a fairy tale. And when at last they came, they were waving with their mittens on, fingers fused into a single woolen spade. You followed when they said there was a fire, a wildfire, they said. And even then you wondered if there was any other kind. Tonight the air is clear, the spring indisputable as dew, the crisp, cool newness of it, which it's sometimes called splendor and sometimes called terror. You raise your hands like a flare. You close your eyes and stutter, come out, wherever you are. You are waiting under the new moon beneath the loom of these impossible trees, but we are coming, I promise. We are rustling our way toward you, murmuring, welcome. Some of us rain swept, some of us wind shook, though some of us are closer than you can imagine. Some of us are glowing like fireflies, our small light unmistakable. Some of us are already here. Thank you.
Julie Marie Wade, thank you very much. And all of our poets, we have had 3 tremendous poets and storytellers tonight. Let's hear it again for Karren Alenier, Mervyn Taylor, and Julie Marie Wade. Get these little boxes rocking. Thank you very much. Well, it looks like we're coming down to the end of our program here. In closing, I would like to, I hope that you've all enjoyed this evening's readers and will extend your enjoyment by purchasing their books and letting others know about this series. I will put those links back into the chat. Please come out on Monday, June 7, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present poets Tara Campbell and Meg Kearney. And we'll see you again on Poets versus the Pandemic on June 16th with John Odell, Reuben Jackson, and Susan Oakey. And until that time, thank you all for coming. Good night and stay safe.